Thank you, Petra, and thank you, Rebecca, for tonight's conversations. And this conversations is actually based on the exhibitions that Petra Siemens is doing with Quartz. It's called Towards a New Monomyth, and it is in Quartz Extra Gallery Space, and it is on until 9th of February 2025. So these exhibitions introduce the viewers to animates in game-like landscape using a virtual version of themselves as a journey to go through their animates reclaims and also explore the limitation between like the 2D and 3D landscapes. And Petra is the Quartz Digital Participation Artist residency. So Petra have done the residency and some workshops with our education and participation team as well. And this exhibition is funded by Arts Council England and Derby City Council. And I mean, Petra and Rebecca, I will just hide myself and goes to you guys.
Sounds good. Thank you for the introduction.
Yeah, thank you, Jodie. Petra, do you want to start? Do you want to tell us who you are?
Well, as you may or may not know, I am an artist who works with, well, primarily video. That is kind of a mixture of like hand-drawn animation and stuff filmed inside video games and also stuff filmed in real life. And then I combine all of these things into multi-layered landscapes, kind of trying to look at how the virtual and the real can interact and then where we can go from these weird in-between zones between different words next to each other and overlapping. That is the short version. Uh, would you like to do a self-introduction, Rebecca?
I can do a really brief one. So my name's Rebecca Edwards, and I'm a curator, writer, and producer based in London. My curatorial practice is quite broad, although it primarily focuses on digital and new media, new technologies. And I'm interested in exploring the nested fields of technology, digital aesthetics, and internet culture. Um, I'm also working with Petra on and off, so it's really great to have this public outcome of us talking about your work together, Petra. So to kick things off, I want to talk about a little bit about the collection of works in the exhibition. And for those of you who are yet to see it, the exhibition Towards a New Monomyth is on at Quad until I think the 9th of February, 2025. But yeah, Petra, maybe you could run us through the journey from entry to the final room of the exhibition and what kind of works people will experience.
Yes, I prepared some slides because I love preparing slides. And I shall show some of these. I hope this is going to work. Someone tell me if it's not working. Um,
I can see
oh,
it.
excellent. I'm going to assume everyone else can. So the exhibition, like Rebecca said, is called Towards a New Monomyth. Oh, I hope I didn't just. Okay, cool. I didn't kill anything. Anyway, so the exhibition is called Towards a New Monomyth. The monomyth is like a specific narrative structure that I think we're going to talk about later, so you don't have to touch on this. And as you can see in this little entrance area, this is what you see when you kind of enter the building at Quad in Derby. And you see it says it's in the extra gallery spaces. And what that means is that it's not in like a how you would imagine a gallery, but in some weird spaces in the buildings, which I find quite interesting because, like I said, I really love in between spaces or like overlapping spaces, places where movement is happening, and well, that's exactly that. So it's kind of you enter, and then you can kind of go up the staircase where there's some prints on the wall that show the character I tend to use in my videos that I refer to as yourself with a capital Y, who is kind of an image of me at certain points of my life in certain videos. And this print on the wall is based on this image that I actually drew up based on Jodie's suggestion, because so this exhibition came about as like part of this digital artist residency thing, and then I went to Quad a few times to try and do some work, look at the space, imagine what is possible. And then I think Jodie in a meeting suggested that it would be interesting to have the character go from sketch until like fully rendered version that I use in my films as a sort of entering into this narrative that I'm presenting in this exhibition. Then you kind of enter this upstairs area, the mezzanine, where you have two large wall prints. I think the right one may be blocked by this little window, but I tried to move it around. And these are collages that I kind of made with the same technique that I use in my videos themselves. And there's also this box in the middle that is a little vitrine with some special objects. So on one of the walls, you have this very large, very colorful print that kind of contains elements that have been in my videos before, or literally scenes from my videos kind of suspended in space, and also a TV screen displaying some video clips, and also it has some of my notes overlaid on top of it. It's kind of an amalgamation of my working process. As you can see in these close-ups, that there's some bits from, there are like sketches from my sketchbook. And then under the sketches, you can see the final realized scene based on those sketches. And then you can see some of the words that I'm writing to myself as I conduct my practice. And also you can also see various elements of other games, like this screenshot that's kind of hovering in the bottom right corner area. I'm not very good with directions. That's from a game called Air that has been very influential for me for my entire career, but particularly in recent years that I started reconsidering it. And then on the other wall, I didn't have a good picture of it, so I just put the image. There's this video that is literally a screenshot of my video making work surface in After Effects, which is the software I tend to use to make my work. And it sort of shows the project I was working on at the time, and then the character I use in my videos is literally kind of climbing out of this work window where I tend to contain the character's movements and kind of leaving behind the editing surface. And I guess maybe climbing out to meet me, I wonder. That's a possibility. And there's a final space. This is my favorite in the whole thing. I call this the toilet wall. This is downstairs on the wall that leads to the toilets. And this is actually a mock-up I made, not a real picture, but it looks just like this in real life. And it's kind of along similar things, but it's kind of hidden. You wouldn't necessarily go in there unless you literally needed a toilet. And I quite like the sense of like the art kind of jumping out at you at an unexpected location. And this is based on an altered video still from my newest video that I have been working on in the background as I was also working towards this exhibition. That ended up being this little animated turning movement inside it. And then finally, I know this is quite a lot of speech from me. There's the vitrine, which is one of my most favorite objects in the exhibition. The vitrine is kind of in the mezzanine area, like I showed earlier. It's the little box in the middle. And it basically has just a lot of objects that are referred to in the handout as from my collection. And what that means is that when I make my works, even when it's real life places in it, often I tend to go to these real life places that appeared in like animated films before or games. So it's like places that have like a very certain tie to the virtual, but in the real world. And then I tend to visit these when I can. And then in some of these places, many of them are in Japan, most of them. And in some of these places, they have like a whole like existing tourism industry based on people wanting to visit places from anime that they enjoy, for example. And then I will pick up official maps that you can see kind of on the left here. Those are for an anime called Sound Euphonium is the English title. And then just various things that I kind of collect through the process. And these trips and these items are very much part of the work. And then as you can kind of see in the collages, like all these little things always come together. And I really wanted to express the background materials that go into my work that people never really get to see. And then there's bits of stuff from my sketchbook where you can see some sketches for scenes that you can see in a different video that's presented in a different room. Kind of like a note I left to myself and then stuck in it when I had an idea for how the script should proceed. The maps that I kind of take care of and then keep in my house. The little model train I have that is the same model that runs in the final scene of my favorite animated film. And then also some notes from my calendar when I had, like a heavenly vision and I had to write it down and then I kind of tore out the pages and then keep them in my sketchbook. Yeah, so this is the short version of what is in the exhibition at Quad. There is also another room in the back that I don't have a picture of that you kind of get to through the mezzanine, and it's displaying one of my video works that I usually see as my main practice. But this was a really great opportunity to kind of explore my practice in a way that's not just video, not just on screens. And I feel like, well, I think the collage stuff I made looks nice, but I think it has a really strong presence in real life because it's really tall. Like if you imagine, like I'm 5'5" 6.5, and then maybe like my head would be just above the TV screen. So it's like, it is very much taller than you, and it really feels like a strong presence. I quite love that as an opportunity to work on.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite parts of this show, as much as like seeing a lot of the behind the scenes sketchbooks and the annotations that made it into the wall pieces, was actually the wall piece opposite where you're coming out of the screen, because it's printed so big that it feels like it is life size, and there's this very strange relationship that you begin to have with the work where you're kind of seeing yourself in it. It's about blending these borders that you talk so much about in your work.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, I guess the work that you mentioned at the end, the work that was pre-existing that you kind of put into the show, we'll get onto that a bit later. But to come back to the body of work that you made for Quad, towards a new monomyth, it proposes a reimagining of the traditional hero's journey in the context of virtual worlds. So I wanted to know, how does the return in this updated monomyth differ from traditional interpretations? And does the hero's journey here remain relevant? Does that narrative still stand? Or are there emerging storytelling forms that better capture this fragmented, diffuse nature of contemporary digital life?
Well, let's return to my slides. I really love making slides. I don't know why I'm talking about it like it's funny. It's quite normal to make slides. Anyway, so the interface is always in the way. Cool. So I have the slide that says monomyth question mark. Let's get to it. So I thought I quite have like a strong history with the narrative structure of the monomyth. So I thought I would talk about what it is, how I got into it, and then how I hoped to rework it in previous works, and then how I kind of revisited this attempt in this body of work. Bear with me, I think it will make sense. So the monomyth is also known as the hero's journey. And this term and this narrative setup was written down by a guy called Joseph Campbell. You can see his name written in the very tiny text. I think he wrote it in the 90s. And he wrote this book based on like various like myths and epic tales of folklore. And then he kind of saw this structure that is shared across these things, and then, wrote down this structure for what he describes as the hero's journey or the monomyth. And this is kind of a story where you kind of start, if you see this circle, you kind of start at the top. And then you have the hero who is, living their ordinary life. And then it's usually separated into three major parts. Part one is departure. Part two is initiation, and part three is return. The words are a bit different here, but then you will see various subtypes of these things in the whole thing, but just, yeah. So in the first act, the hero is living in their ordinary life, and then suddenly some crisis appears, or they get some information from a god, or like some kind of enemies appear, and then they have to depart onto this grand adventure. And then they move down the circle, and then you see that they cross this line, which is kind of a sort of threshold where you cross over from the ordinary everyday life of your life that you live into the special alternative world of the adventure. In a lot of mythologies, this is often literally the underworld, so like the world of the dead, some place that is not natural for you as a living person to be in. Then you enter the second act, which is usually called initiation, and then you kind of go through various ordeals and trials, trying to, solve this problem that you have been taken on a mission to solve as a hero. And then eventually it kind of reaches this like cathartic point where you reach the end of initiation and solve the problems, and then kind of exit the underworld, and then return in the third part called return to your ordinary life with some kind of incorporation of the knowledge of the special place that you visited, but you are definitely not there anymore. And then you kind of, return to your normal life. And then all these experiences are unified within your character. So there's this structure. How did I get into this? Is basically thanks to this Tumblr post that I am actually shocked I managed to find. I found it 9 years ago. It's from a now deactivated Tumblr user called Eggman. and it is about an anime called Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, which is an adaptation of the Fullmetal Alchemist manga. And it's just, well, the post, if you read it, it's full of spoilers, but I mean, it came out more than 15 years ago. You can live with that. It basically talks through this anime story within the trope of this monomyth, and then how the anime is made up of multiple small monomyths that kind of follow each other within this one grand monomyth. And then it also has lots of mythological references. And then it kind of also subverts this trope. And then basically I read this, and then I thought, monomyth, what is that? That sounds interesting. And then I went into the Joseph Campbell Wikipedia, and then I found the graph. And then I got really, really fixated on this, particularly because I love a structure, because particularly in the monomyth, because it kind of offers you this idea that you have your normal life, like the real world, for example, and then you can leave, and then you go into this virtual different space, and then you can return, and then it kind of has this idea of a relatively clear threshold between what's normal and what's not normal. And well, I don't think this model necessarily stays true to how people experience life, and then also like their selves, and then, you know, especially in the technological landscape that we live inside. But I think it's very good to use a structure, because when you use a structure to look at something, it becomes very obvious what falls outside of the structure, and then you can focus on that too. And the other reason why I was really fascinated by this monomyth, we'll get back to this, is that, back to Fullmetal Alchemist, to say it shortly, it's a story about a world in which it's kind of like pseudo-European. There's also like some genocide going on done by the pseudo-European people. So it's really like politically complex. But also all throughout this, instead of like high-tech stuff, they have alchemical powers. And the military in this world also uses these alchemical powers that are basically the power to kind of take something and then break it down to its components and remake it as something new made up of the same components. And it kind of works along this idea of what they call equivalent exchange, where like, you know, if I have this cup and then I was to put alchemy onto it, I could remake something out of it that is made of the same clay, sort of. But, you know, you can't, I couldn't break this down and turn it into gold. That's not possible because it's not equivalent materials. There is one thing forbidden in alchemy, which is resurrecting a human who has passed away, or like creating a living human body. And the story follows these brothers whose mother dies when they're very young, and then they kind of study alchemy really strongly, and then eventually attempt to resurrect their mother, and a horrible thing happens. When they attempt this thing that you are absolutely forbidden to do, the human transmutation, they are transported to this alternative realm that is kind of a white space, and there's like this massive door in the background. And in the story, this is called the Gate of Truth, usually. And then there they are greeted by this strange white being, kind of like human shape but faceless. And once they commit this horrible sin, then they must face what is beyond the Gate of Truth. It's called Truth because the character that they talk to kind of introduces himself as Truth. I'm using him in like a gender neutral sense. And when asked about what he is, he says that it's in the translation that I tried to write here. I am what you would call the word, or space, or God, or truth, or everything, or one. So it's, you know, it's very all-encompassing, very like sublime and intense. Then the character is dragged into the door and then kind of has to face some of this truth. He goes through this horrible ordeal of having to take in information that his body cannot hold in anymore physically. And then when he comes out, he is missing 2 of his limbs. His younger brother loses his entire body, and then only his soul remains, and then it's tied to like an armor that he moves around in, but he literally loses his human body. And I became really into this idea because, I mean, this is the ultimate underworld that the hero can go into. And then it's kind of this idea that you have this truth, which I see as like objective reality, or like information that is too big for your human brain to comprehend. I like to think of the sea as this thing where like, you know, I understand what the sea is, it's full of water, but like, can you comprehend the largeness of the sea? I don't think you can, personally. And I see this sort of setup as this truth that like the human perceptual system cannot make sense of. And then the more you see of it, the more of your human body you literally violently lose in this setup in the anime. So I got really into this idea of crossing over into a realm that is like so unhuman that the mere perception of it like renders your human body literally unusable. And then I got really into the whole monomyth thing, and I made a whole video series that is titled the Monomyth Guidance Series between 2018 and 2020, which kind of follows. The first part is called Departure, second part is called Initiation, third part is Return, and the last fourth part is called Master of Two Words, which is kind of a subsection of Return. And in this, I kind of tried to look at the idea of, the multi-layered contemporary landscape that we live in, like surrounded by screens, various image words that we kind of tap out and into all the time, and then how we're navigating all these images that we live amongst, but also my fascination with the spaces in the real world that are very tied to these images, such as like anime locations, for example, or game words that remind me of real life. Feel free to say any comments, Rebecca, because
Sorry, yeah, no, I'm listening. I'm kind of engrossed in what you're saying, but it reminds me a lot of like the glitch in the Matrix sort of photographs that you see where I don't know, things just look a bit off, or like there's a weird doubling of people going on, and it's this kind of stuff. But I want to come back to what you were saying about this kind of door of truth, because whilst you were talking about that, it made me think about this idea of like liminal spaces and these threshold sort of situations. And I think the exhibition at Quad speaks a lot to that. And I was wondering for you, because I think a lot of your work in general speaks to this idea of being in not necessarily a non-place, because I don't think your work is really a space of transience, but definitely it's like a liminal space, a virtual liminal space. So how do these virtual liminal spaces contrast with material ones for you? And what do you think they might offer in terms of maybe different opportunities for transformation or self-discovery, either of the hero yourself or you as an artist?
Yes. So actually, I think kind of like finishing the whole anecdote about the monomyths, I made this video series, which I think it's decent, it's nice. And that was kind of going around this circle that you can see. You will notice that the current exhibition is called Towards a New Monomyth. And then when I finished this video series, I always felt a bit like that I did the monomyth, but I kind of missed something. And then you see in this beautiful graph that in the middle of the word, it says word navel, which is a very interesting term. So it's kind of like the center of everything, where like all of these segments are kind of existing at the same time, which is kind of how I would imagine that's where the door is, if the door is in a space. And I think in this Towards a New Monomyth, I really wanted to look behind the door. I think that's kind of what I was like, instead of going around the door in a circle multiple times, doing these departures and returns, and then departures and returns, kind of always being in the middle space, I really wanted to be like bypassing the circle and then just going into the bottom, kind of like face something that is really, really hard to.
It's like you're kind of no clipping out of the own reality that you've made for yourself.
Yes, basically, kind of just wanting to like get under the floor somehow and then see all the polygons rising in space. And then also with the thing about, like virtual liminal spaces contrasting with material liminal spaces, or, like the real being inside the virtual kind of. I think what I really get fascinated by, I will stop the sharing for now, I think, is this idea that like when you're neither departing nor returning, because I kind of see this monomyth as like, because you can't distance yourself from the virtual, nor can you fully immerse yourself in the real, like as in like 100%, nothing fictional is entering your brain. You're kind of stuck in this position where like you can't leave, but you can't return. So it's like this ongoing process of initiation. And then this is like a very displaced position that I think becomes even more accentuated when I go to a place in real life that I have seen in like literally like an anime on a screen. And then so it's like, I know the place, but then I'm not in front of the screen, I'm in the real place. And then it's kind of like neither here nor there. And then because you become displaced, I feel like it just forces you to rework an entirely new model for like, okay, so like what does the reality consist of in this in-between position? And I think this kind of also applies to the weird feeling you get when, like, I don't know, hospital waiting rooms are really strange. I feel like recently I spoke a lot with people about dentists that are just in like old Victorian houses, and then how those feel like a strange non-place. And I think even just like being in a place like that, I think even that makes you question a bit like, what word is this? Where am I? What are the
Mm.
parameters of what is happening in here?
But I guess I do feel like we're more and more like the generations that are kind of coming up behind us and our generations, like we're already living in this dual world of both kind of not really able to get rid of any idea of fiction in our lives, but also not being able to fully adopt the digital and become completely like anamorphs of ourselves or something.
Mm.
So we're always within this particular threshold. But it's interesting what you said about the like dentists and spaces like that. It also makes me think of tourism. I mean, we've spoken about that before. You know, the idea of going to a place that's been so photographed,
Mm.
and getting there and it not really being how you imagine, but you imagined it through the lens of somebody else or some other context.
Mm.
So yeah, it's all these like a layering, I guess, of different experiences and stuff like that. But
And also with the tourism, often the pictures that you used to imagine the place are pictures that people have taken based on other pictures that they have already seen of the place. It's
yes,
like
so there's
maybe
one
image.
angle, take the picture.
Yeah,
Yeah, I find that
usually.
very strange.
Yeah. There's a spot near Mount Fuji, in a nearby village where you can kind of take the famous photograph where you see the pagoda and then the cherry blossoms and the mountain. And it's like, well, I went there once, and well, I had to queue for some time to take the picture, and then I took the picture, and then it felt very strange, like what am I participating in? It felt like a ritual, but I'm
Yeah.
not sure what. You're like upholding this fabric of a reality when you
Well,
can just get the
it kind
mountain
of,
next to you.
yeah, I feel like it builds on this idea of pics or it didn't happen. It's like people that go to these places probably feel obliged to do it because they're seeing everybody else doing it. So they're like, well, I should do it then because everybody else is doing it. I don't want to be left out. I want to go home with the picture that everybody else has got to prove that I was there. You know, it's
Mm,
this weird, like chicken and egg kind of weird loop
yeah.
scenario.
It's like, did you visit the picture or did you visit the place?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I've definitely done that before. I've been to places for sure and I've taken the picture because everybody else has, but it does make you question why you're doing it. Um, but I want to move on to the kinds of things that your animated films contain. So you have, I mean, they're so visually rich and they incorporate so many different elements. So we've got like 3D scans, digital collages, screen grabs, like photographs, as we've just mentioned. So how do these fragmented elements or seemingly fragmented elements contribute to your storytelling? Um, and I guess, why did you choose the specific visual sources for the works at Quad? I know you spoke a little bit about giving sort of access to behind the scenes and showing the software
Mm.
that you use, but maybe you could just expand on that a little bit.
I think I have more slides for this. And I kind of just arranged the slides in an order, but they don't have to be done in that certain order. But I kind of went through. So I kind of mentioned in the beginning that a lot of the real stuff that you see in my work is like through anime pilgrimages. If someone is not familiar with the term, which is very normal unless you're into anime, um, it refers to the idea of from the beginning. It refers to the act of going to a place in the real world that you have seen in an anime before, and then the standard thing that most people do, I believe, is, or like many people do this, is that they try to take a picture in the real world that kind of aligns the real world in the same angles that the anime does, so you can kind of recreate the shot in the anime but in the real world. This picture I have is from the crossing that's in the final scene of 5 centimeters per second, my favorite animated film. And then it's me taking some footage there with my little camera. I took really bad footage there the first 3 times I went, so I was really sad. And then here I just have some little resources that kind of show that, it's like a real place on the map. You can see it marked, and then it's the shots from the film. And then I kind of visit them searching for something. And then there's also some other places that I kind of have as examples. This is in a place called Chichibu that is kind of to the north of Tokyo. Many animes take place there, and they take the anime tourism very seriously. And actually, it's really tied into like local upkeeping of the town. Lots of anime fans go there to volunteer and then kind of clean up parks, which I think is quite amazing. But that's not related to this thing. But you can kind of see the anime poster and then my picture of the place, and then how the picture of the place then kind of entered my video where I kind of overlaid it with my character and then the mountains from Skyrim. This is from the Monomyth Gaiden initiation video.
I mean, it's just so interesting how you've kind of taken real footage or real locations that have been photographed by so many anime fans, but then you've also mixed that with mountains from Skyrim and then your own character. Like it's just again, there are so many layers to the sort of visual identity of your work.
It's kind of like compressing all of these things that I feel like in my heart connect to the same thing. This is just a video I made from some Skyrim landscapes that I made it look like Google Maps. This is maybe not deeply related, but it's kind of immersing a character into a virtual world where even the virtual character is not done within the same visual language as the game itself. So it's like a discrepancy between two different virtual languages. Isn't that fun? But kind of, I wanted to touch on this point that, so like when I construct my animation things, a lot of it is done with a lot of it is inspired by anime that I watch, sometimes for enjoyment, sometimes for research. This is actually from a Fullmetal Alchemist opening, where there's this shot where the characters as children walk on the hill, and then kind of in the shot, the hills in the background move to one side and the hills in the front move to the other side. So you get this parallax effect of like a sprawling landscape. And well, I thought, isn't this great? I would love to recreate this. So then I took this into my sketchbook. You can see a scan of where I drew kind of like a test picture of how I would imagine my animation growing, and then try to separate it into layers that I would cut out from or draw myself, and then arrange in like 3D space inside my video editing software, and then kind of try and recreate the same thing. And then this is a similar approach to kind of how I tend to do my work, because I read a lot of stuff that then I take notes in, and then I dissect a lot of stuff that I watch so I can recreate parts of it or use elements of movement within those images inside my moving image works. And then it kind of, all of these things sort of, let's go back to the things I made, kind of enter. So like, I think it's the best exemplified in this big one, because it kind of, it has the literal like layers of mountains that I may use in my videos. It has some pictures that I have used in videos, pictures from my videos, some of my character animations, but all the frames are visible at the same time. And then some like research notes that I have taken, sketches I have done. So it's kind of trying to do the same layering that they do in like anime production, but kind of collapsing all of my interests into one thing. And I think all of my interests are to do with a sort of like neither here nor there feeling, or like a sort of virtual situation where you feel a bit like it's seeping into the real life, or a real life situation that feels like it's seeping into the virtual. Kind of like hiking in Eastern Europe feels a lot like being in Skyrim, and vice versa. Being in Skyrim feels a lot like, oh, I'm going home. So these sort of strange places where that takes you. And I think that is kind of where the visual language of the work, both in my videos, and then I think the things I made for Quad are kind of like a really compressed state of the videos that I usually make. And as kind of a last slide for this one, there's an essay by a person called Watanabe Daisuke, whose name I think you can see at the top. It's only available in Japanese, but he talks about the films of this director who I'm obsessed with, Shinkai Makoto. And he talks about this plasticity that he sees and how his images are constructed. He kind of, because they are constructed from many layers, like there's the clouds, there's the sky in the background, there's the rising smoke, there's the plants in the front, there's the characters. And Watanabe Daisuke describes that Shinkai's works have this plasticity to them where you feel like it's a whole image, but then at the same time as it's moving, you feel like every layer could change into something else. It's kind of like movement that has the potential of movement into something else. And I kind of feel like that's what I'm trying to do in my own work, of this like like kind of unstable realities made up of different layers where you feel like the layers could shift out from under you and then into something else in
Mm,
both a way that is kind of concerning because you are not sure where you are, and both in a way that's comforting because it has so much potential for change.
mm. So almost a little bit like fractals, or I don't know, typical AI videos that you see, especially of textures that kind of morph into
Mm.
vegetables that then morph into something else. So it's this kind of possibility is there.
Yeah, I think so. But I think, well, actually, well, I mean, I'm not really an AI enjoyer, but actually, I think this is to do with something else I was working on recently. But I feel like something, because I like the shifting things into other things, but then I was thinking of why do I hate these AI videos? Partially because I think, well, I mean, I don't know, ethics and stuff, and the world is burning down. And also sometimes very good artists use it, and I'm just like, oh, just make your own art. But anyway, that's not relevant. I think what I don't like about it is that because the morphing is so smooth, and
Mm.
I think a lot about there's this scholar who writes about perspective and animation, very loud car outside, called Thomas Lemore, and he writes about this thing that's called radical perspectivalism, and he proposes this as an opposition to like one point perspective that is like it's very smooth, it's very complete. You feel like when you look at the screen and there's like the perspective going inside, you feel like you're kind of entering it from the outside, like peering in, and it feels very much like self versus other, like you're looking at something else that is kind of pulling you in, but then because you feel like you're entering something else, it really reinstates the distance between you. And there's not really any space for you to enter in a meaningful way. Whereas in a lot of anime, especially low budget stuff, the movement is kind of not created from like a total 3D imaging, even if they do use 3D techniques, but like different 2D layers that kind of slide at different speeds, and they create like a sense of depth. But then you can also see that these are discrete layers with a gap between them. Like you can always see the seams, even if it like feels like smooth movement. Like you can tell already editing has been done internally in the image.
Mm.
And I think that's the part that really excites me. And I feel like that's the part that's missing from the AI videos because they're so smooth. I feel like they don't leave the gap. And I love the gap.
Mm.
That was
Yeah,
kind of, I'm sorry.
no, it reminds me of the kind of the white cube. What is it even called? It's like the gap between the wall and the floor. I've forgotten. I used to know this, but it's like the negative space, that gap that kind of situates the work in a white cube and kind of elevates it. So it's this kind of like slippage, this borderland,
Mm.
this sort of like a break in continuity that kind of says something is here, something is kind of
Mm. And then you feel like you can like put your fingers in it and then kind of pull it apart. And then you also become part of that strange
mm,
layer. I think
yeah,
that really attracts me. And that's kind of where I see the storytelling potential that like you have all these fragments and then they kind of constitute something that looks whole, but then it's a sort of whole that makes space for different perspectives inside it at the same time. And the whole radical perspectivalism thing that Lamar talks about is kind of like having an image that looks like kind of like, a nice composited word, but then the layers inside it retain different perspectives inside themselves. So it's kind of like it doesn't all get flattened into like one
mm,
vanishing point.
mm,
And,
mm,
well, I mean, I think that's not really about the vanishing point, especially because, like so much of like cinematic, very straight on vanishing point stuff is like, like digitally animated. So it's not really about the technique itself, but I feel like a way of constructing the composition.
yeah, yeah, for sure. I want to move on a little bit to the avatar yourself, who we've seen in a lot of the slides you've shown us, and it's essentially a drawing of you through many stages of your artistic life. So we can see in some versions of yourself you have longer hair, in others you have shorter hair, in some you have very pink hair, etc. So the protagonist yourself always somehow mirrors you in real life. Is that fair to say?
I think so in some ways, though I feel like, because I've been working with yourself since approximately second year of university, which may have been nearly 10 years ago.
Oh,
Like
wow.
nine, nine, I think, yes. Not quite the 10-year anniversary, but that's quite touching. And in the beginning, I kind of just came up with yourself as, well, yourself was part of this. I was having a crisis at the time, and then I tried to get myself out of depression by drawing this comic in which I talk to my future cooler self called Yourself But Cooler. And then this cooler self was not depressed anymore and then spoke to me, that depressed me about, I don't know, how the future is possible. And then it kind of helped. And then I was starting to make videos at the time, and then kind of yourself appeared as the obvious solution, partially because I really wanted to enter the spaces that I was putting the avatar in,
Mm.
and partially because I'm not that good at making up characters. Um, and then it kind of became as this thing that were like, oh, yourself is me. But then there were weird times, especially with the long hair stuff, where I started making a massive new video. And then 1 month after the process started, I cut my hair very short. But then I already started animating the long hair character. And then I feel like character outfits are very particular in animation, at least to me. Like, that's like a cohesive whole. I couldn't disrupt that, and I didn't want to redo the animation. So there started to form these gaps between between us. And then now I feel like yourself feels like a character that is both me, but also just a character that looks like me, but is not me ultimately. So it's kind of like a strange relationship, which is
Yeah, so
quite fun to navigate.
it's not exactly your digital twin, it's like your digital parallel or something.
Yeah, parallel is a good word. I feel like sometimes people describe avatars as like vessels, and
Mm.
then, well, I mean, it's kind of true because you sort of have this thing, and then you kind of enter the thing. But then I think I really uh, want to use avatars in a way, whether it's yourself or like a different person. Because recently, for a little collaboration with artist David Blundy, I made an avatar of him that yourself actually spoke to, which is the first time yourself has spoken to anyone.
Yeah,
Um, and actually, it's even quite recent that yourself spoke in a video, or at least, well, I mean, sometimes people watch the videos and there's the narration, which is my voice, which is also yourself's voice. But then it's kind of, I never see that as yourself speaking.
mm,
But then in one of my videos, I added some lines for yourself, and it felt very weird. When I
mm,
was saying them for the narration, it felt like I was doing voice acting, and I was like, I am acting myself, sounding
mm.
like a natural person. What a weird thing. But anyway, so it's kind of like, I feel like yourself is kind of someone that is, I both kind of control in my work, but then also someone who is, like a complete being on their own, and then does things that I kind of don't get access to. And then
Yeah,
this kind of tied into the mezzanine piece where like yourself is climbing out of the interface. And that kind of ties into this like discrepancy between yourself and me, and then how kind of I have this body and then yourself has the data body. And then I tried to think about the time we spent together, and the videos exist and the pictures exist. But like the most time I spend with yourself is on the editing surface. It's like that is our zone together. And then I kind of just tried to imagine of like what happens to yourself when I kind of close the software and the data is still on my computer. So it's like the body is in there, even if the file is not open. And then kind of tried to imagine that in the sense of like the monomyth thing of like departing and then returning. And I wonder if yourself is departing or returning in that scene actually.
yeah. I also wonder about the fact that yourself has been part of your practice for almost a decade. It makes me think about where in the hero's journey they are as
Mm.
as a protagonist, as a kind of hero to your practice, but also, how your relationship to them has changed, introducing another character in your work with David Blandy.
Mm.
We've spoken a lot before about I think I asked you once, what language do you dream in? Because
Mm.
you speak multiple languages, and this idea that of what does yourself speak in? How does yourself sound? I mean, it's you narrate your films with your own voice, but you've just said that you actually don't see yourself having your own voice. So there's kind of like again this weird slippage between the digital and the physical body of you.
Mm.
It makes me think
Oh, sorry.
about no, you go.
Oh no, it's just it made me think of the line I gave yourself for the first line that they speak actually is I don't know, I forgot the first half of the line, but it kind of ends on like, oh, I wonder like why these landscapes around me keep changing, and then what this voice is that I keep hearing that sounds the same as I do. Because I just thought, what a weird experience that, like, if I imagine that, like, okay, I am yourself, I'm traveling in these lands, and then there's like weird narrator that keeps speaking over me,
Mm.
but then it sounds exactly the same as my voice. And
Mm.
then kind of the video sort of ends on a thought, the segment where yourself speaks ends with a thought where like yourself is looking at this like load screen interface from the back. So it's like kind of like seeing the loading screen of a game from the inside, and then sort of wondering whether the voice is located on the outside of that sounds the same as theirs. Um, and then language. And then actually I was looking at because of the whole monomyth thing, I get over prepared with my slides, and then I thought, wow, information is so exciting. And then I will show this one thing, but actually, if anyone wants to learn more about the monomyth, um, there is a very good essay about the monomyth video series I made by this person called Gemma Fantacci, who is Italian but now based in the UK, I believe. It has like a little abstract in Italian, but the paper is in English, and it's kind of about what it says, experiencing life as cinematic fiction, and kind of this idea of the marvelous, which I kind of in my own work describe as like, something that like more than human, or like something that's really ungraspable, something really intense, and then looks really strongly at the Joseph Campbell monomyth thing, like probably like stronger than I ever have, or like with more nuance, and really dissects my work in a really amazing way. It's a great essay. But as I was searching for this, I found an interview that Gemma did with me in 2021, when I actually started thinking about like national heritage, language, and yourself, and then kind of considered that at the time, yourself, the character, has only been inside like Japanese landscapes. But it's like I'm white, and then so it's like I was an immigrant in Japan, I am an immigrant in the UK. And then it's like I had this thought that like the closest that yourself has been to Eastern Europe at that point was inside Skyrim, which I kind of think of as my locale, the Carpathian Basin. And I just thought, what a weird like would yourself speak Hungarian? Is that even a possibility? So
Mm.
yeah, interesting.
Mm.
And for those who are wondering, I dream in many languages, mostly the one that I speak the most in the place that I am in. So usually it's in English these days, but then if I read in Japanese before bedtime, sometimes I dream in Japanese. And then when I'm in Japan, I dream Japanese a lot. And then when I return to Hungary, it takes some weeks, but the Hungarian returns. Brains, man.
Yeah, there's something really nice that you say about this exact thing in one of your other works. I think it's Borderers Interface, which is a new work that will be linked. But I just wanted to mention as a side note, because if I don't, I'll kick myself. On Petra's website, it's called Dress the Artist. And I remember when I stumbled upon this a few months ago and I got obsessed with it. Basically, you can dress yourself throughout the ages in many different outfits. And it's Petra, I think it's such a wonderful game that you've put on your site, and I feel like it doesn't get enough attention. So I want to bring attention to it. Yeah, maybe you can show us actually. That would
Yeah,
be
I'm
really
gonna try. I hope it's gonna work. This is something I made in 2020, no, 2017.
fun. Okay.
Dress the Artist. What? Ah, it loads. Okay, so this is me with my haircut at the time, and then I have level 3, which was yourself 3 years in. I mean, it's kind of a boring thing to like do the levels. I actually had someone ask me once, because like the levels keep increasing in my head. With every year I spend with yourself, I add a level. And then this person said that like, isn't that very linear and kind of against the whole fragmentation thing I'm doing? Because it's like that's a very straight line.
Yeah, that's
And
a
then
good.
keep increasing, and then it made me feel very bad. But like I think it was a very good comment because I never considered.
Yeah.
Um, but so that's the internal system we use. So it's like level 3, old haircut. I used to have long hair, and then first haircut into a bob, and then I had this like K-pop haircut I called. And then you can change different glasses. You can put little clothes on me. This is a t-shirt that I embroidered with something like the void calls to me, and then like a circle. And it used to be in my videos all the time. And I put it in my degree show installation, and someone stole it. So whoever has that crop top, I hope they enjoy it. And the best part of the game, I think, is the animu button that you press, and then the cherry blossoms come and the hair goes around.
It's just beautiful. I
It
think
works
for
for all
me,
of them.
your work sort of accesses a part of my brain that is both nostalgia and just like pure childlike joy, because it's
Mhm.
often so colorful and it's yeah, it's just it's just really beautiful work. And as well, I'm kind of interested to hear a bit more about what you just said about the reason you made yourself the avatar as a kind of way to imagine a different life for yourself, maybe. I mean, maybe that's a bit too putting a bit too much on it, but it made me think of other avatars that are in contemporary culture, like La Turbo Avedon, who's been
Mm,
for a long, long time. Started off in a video game that I forget the name of. But then you've got people like Lil Michaela as well. Um, who was an influencer. I haven't really heard much from Lil Michaela recently, so I'm not really sure what's going on with them. But then it also reminded me of there's a Netflix documentary out, and Netflix is good for certain things, but this documentary is so moving. It's called The Remarkable Life of Evelyn. I don't
oh,
know
I
if
feel like I've heard about this.
yeah, and it just kind of so this person was using World of Warcraft to essentially live out their dream life because they were I think they had I don't know if it was MS or some kind of condition that meant that they lost the use of their body essentially. So they lived out their life through an online game world, a multiplayer online game world. And it just made me think about like the potential for these avatars to be something other than just frivolous and sort of childish. Like they actually offer so much to the people that use them. And I know that this is a conversation that I'm sure many people listening will have been party to at some point, at least since COVID, for sure, since the pandemic. But yeah, I just kind of wanted to return to that because I think that was a really interesting thing that you said, and I actually didn't know that about the avatar yourself.
Yeah, and it's kind of strange how, and I feel like that must be a technique that people turn to even if they are not, like into the virtual, they're not playing games, they don't have an avatar. Like I feel like often you kind of, sometimes it helps to think of yourself as someone who is not you, to
Mm.
kind of push yourself along the line. Recently, I saw someone on the internet say that like whenever I feel depressed, I think of myself as like, some animal in a zoo, and then being just like the tiger doesn't have enough enrichment in the enclosure. And then you feel like, oh yes, I need to enrich myself for the tiger, who
Mm.
I also am. So it's a kind of like this weird situation. But also it made me think of the films you mentioned. There's an artist called Jamie Yankovic who has a work that's called A Woman on the Internet, or The Eternal Scream, I think that's the full title, which is like kind of like a video essay, mostly in GTA, and then it has poetry by Jamie about kind of like being trans and playing video games and the avatars in the video games, but also it's overlaid with interviews with different queer, mostly trans people about their experiences with like first avatar they used, how it felt, and then the kind of like customization that the avatar has that like your real body does not quite respond as fast to customization as the avatar does, and then kind of this discrepancy. And then also like the violence enacted on women's bodies inside these weird spaces. That's kind of yeah, and I think it's really interesting. I think it's very very relevant for many many people, and also I think it's a very like more empathic way of looking at avatars because it's like because you
Mm.
get so much from them, and I think when they're like thought of as like a vessel that you put in yourself, and then they are empty when you leave them behind, it kind of it's just like it doesn't really offer them any grace, and
Mm.
you give them a lot with your presence and like your movements and then your thoughts and your control. It's kind of like a co-working relationship sometimes. But
Mm.
then also like you get so much from the avatar, I feel like.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Um, I think we're kind of coming up to time, but I just wanted to end with a little bit about your experience on the digital participation artist residency, because I know that the exhibition at Quad was the culmination of a period of research that you undertook at Quad. And I know that you had workshops and other activities during that time. Yeah, how was that for you, and what were the outcomes of the workshops?
So it was actually really fun. It was my first ever residency I did, and I always find them very hard as a concept because, well, I mentioned I'm mostly like a video artist, is how I see myself, but then I make these, non-video works. But like my work is so time consuming. So it's like I feel like the fastest I've ever made like a solid work was like 6 months. So whenever there's like a residency of like, like 2 weeks that you can spend in a place, it always feels a bit like, oh, what can I do? In like a very nervous way. But it was really nice to work on something that is, a still thing. It will grow on the walls. And then it was really And it's like a really fun city. I discovered lots of interesting things. A little anime shop in Derby that apparently is quite active in like organizing like Japanese cultural events. So it felt like a nice little overlap. And also it was just really nice to even, because I feel like, because of the time limit, I didn't have loads of time to speak to everyone at Quad, but like the chats we had with Jodie about the work were really refreshing because I usually just work um, on my own. And I'm very happy to work on my own, but I also really like talking to people. And it was really nice. I really liked Jodie's suggestion about the characters, for example. I don't think I would have reached that by myself. And the workshops were mostly with like either like young people. I think they are just defined as young people, so like under 21 usually. And then there was one group that was like between 12 and 16. And I used an app that is called Downpour, which is a little game making app on your phone. And I kind of tried to get the participants to draw these maps that are not like a map of real space, but kind of like a map of a day in your life, or like I don't know, like a route you take, a park you like, but not in like cartography, but like putting your emotions into it, kind of how compressing space in the way that I compress space into my collages. And then they did amazing work. And then in the app, you can kind of take pictures of things and then turn them into buttons and then connect different elements together. It's really good.
Shout,
And then yeah.
shout out, so good.
That's Downpour. And then the people took pictures of these maps and then kind of drew new things for the game, and then they kind of made a playable version of the maps, and it was amazing. I learned a lot about buses from this little guy who was really into buses in Derby and made a bus game and also kept pointing at the buses through the window. It was really fun.
That's cute. Yeah, Downpour is a really wonderful phone-based game, so you don't even have to have any knowledge of any
Yeah.
coding,
No coding, no nothing, free.
free to download. Yeah, super cool. Lots of fun things you can do on there.
Yeah, there's a game on there about my hamster, which you may find on the Downpour page. So, you can check that out. Shout out to my hamster.
Yeah, Daizu, what a guy. We actually have a question in the chat, Petra.
Yes.
From Yuhan. Thank you so much for asking. Yuhan's asked, animators are often very visual people. What can we practice to help articulate our work? That's a good question. What kind of things do you do, Petra, that you practice to articulate yourself?
I think often, I feel like with animation, unless you have lots of practice, because the movement is quite hard to grasp unless it's very simple. I don't think I'm the best animator ever, but I think the best thing for practice is somehow getting hold of animation you like. And then sometimes often I download the video from the internet, either legally or illegally, however I can, or like screen record a bit of a clip on YouTube. And then you can like take this clip and then put it into like a video editing software if you are familiar with them. But I think you can even do this on your phone. And then you can zoom in really far into the timeline and then kind of see how the animation changes frame to frame. And then you can see how the movements that they achieve, how they are actually drawn, because often movements are not drawn in the way that you would expect them to be. Like sometimes when you move an arm from here to there very fast, actually the middle frame is not the arm in the middle, but kind of like a zigzag line to create like a stronger sense of speed. And I think inspecting how the kind of animation or movement or like the visuals that impress you, inspecting how those are done, and then trying to recreate them, either rethinking them and creatively using them or literally copying them to practice. I think that's really good, I think. And also really interesting. It's really fun.
Yeah, I think that's a good tip, isn't it? It makes me think about people that buy designer clothes to kind of take them apart to see how they were constructed. It's a similar kind of.
Oh, I didn't know people did that, but that makes so much sense.
Yeah, I think especially like archival pieces maybe, and I don't know, anything that's kind of, I mean, not couture because that would be crazy to buy that and to take it apart, but just to get the sense of how a shirt is constructed to then learn. That makes sense that you would do that, Petra. I'm trying to, as you were speaking, I was trying to think about other things that I've noticed in your work as and in things you do in your animations to kind of imitate gestures or speaking, or if yourself is thinking, but I can't really think of anything on the top of my head.
Yeah, I feel like I do a lot of like hair movements because I think it looks cool, but also it's relatively easy to do. But I actually learned a lot of the hair movement stuff. If you compare my early hair movements to current hair movements, they are quite different because I think I understand how hair is meant to move a bit differently now. And a lot of that came from looking at these like animated clips that I think impressed me with their movement and just being just like, okay, where does this strand of hair actually go in this millisecond? But then
Mm.
you really take so much away from it.
I mean, I think from knowing you and your work a little bit, like from what you've shown from your sketchbooks, you draw a lot of your frames out. You plan a lot of it, right? It doesn't.
Yeah.
It's like you sit down and you spend an hour and then you've made a film. Like it's days and days of work to prep each scene, to understand the composition of each scene
Mm.
and how you kind of move through that.
Yeah, and then sometimes it's easier with some scenes, and then sometimes it's really hard to figure out actually what way of constructing the scene will work. And then sometimes that's just stuff that I come up with. Sometimes it's just stuff in real life that there's a scene that is both in quad and in my newest video actually. Um, that is kind of like this like train platform kind of like pulling out, and that was just like a vision I had when I was on this train platform of the different layers sliding against each other. And then I just took loads of pictures of different stages of it and then separated them into layers and then tried to reassemble the platform from its components so that I
Mm.
can do this illusion of movement. And so it's like there's experiments that kind of just come from my head, but then a lot of it is like stuff that like I will see a scene in the anime and then sometimes I take a video on my phone because often you can't record the screen these days. And then I will look at the video on my phone, pause it, and then do some sketches based on that, and then kind of like try and figure out my own work. And then usually it gets altered quite a lot by the time you get to the end of it. So it's not like, I mean, it is copying, but then also it's like, it's not like copying in the sense of stealing, but like inspiration taking, which a lot of animators do anyway.
Yeah, totally. Um, Jodie, how are we doing for time?
Oh, of course, I have unmute myself. I mean, it's good if you guys have come up with everything. And also, I mean, if anyone have any questions, please ask Rebecca or Petra. And if you guys are interested in Petra's work and also interested in like Petra's um games on their website, it's on their chat rooms out there as well. And also there's like more information about their exhibition and the talk on Quad website if you want to look at. And if everyone have no questions other than Johan's questions just now, we can just do a wrap for the conversation if that's okay for everyone.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you for listening, everyone.